All right, everyone. Welcome to episode 32 of the Detroit Sports Podcast, the Doc and Jock Sports Show. I am the Doc, John Macaroon, and joining me is my cousin, a man who provides great sports knowledge, my cousin, Adam Straczynski. What's going on, cuz?
Not too much, man. I wanted to thank you for the dick pic earlier today.
What the hell is that about?
That was appreciated. That thing was a monster, and for a very short man, you're working with a hog there. Thanks. Don't ever send that to me ever again.
Okay, to clarify, for those who have been shocked now by what you just said, I saw on Facebook that this great news station was doing a news story, and they were looking at the producer's Twitter page. They accidentally let a picture of a phallic genital, a male genital, on the air.
It was a penis, bro. It's okay. You can say that. It's a podcast. It was a dick.
Epic fail. And so I felt the need to share that with you because I knew you'd open it and be like, what the hell is this guy saying?
That thing was a monster hog, too. I had some penis envy going on.
All right, cuz we got a stacked podcast. This podcast is really stacked. We are going to talk Lions with Mike Mady from LionsReport.com. He's a Lions reporter. I can tell that he's going to have a lot of good inside information regarding Lions and free agency. And we'll talk a little bit about the Golden Tate signing with Mike Mady. We're also going to talk baseball with Andrew Vigliotti from Outside Pitch MLB, and he is very knowledgeable regarding all things baseball, and we're going to hit on the Tigers' offseason moves, what the impact of the recent injuries has been, and we're going to get a lot of inside information from outside the city. So it's great. It's great to do this podcast, and the reason why we love doing it is that we can talk to people outside of Michigan and get some insight regarding our Detroit Tigers. Now, to kick off the show, this is the week, cuz today, as people are listening to this podcast, they are going to be watching the opening rounds of the NCAA tournament. I can't wait. And cause I just want to share a quick story. Sunday, after the selection show, I was hanging out with the family, kind of dozed off a little bit, woke up 11:30 on the couch with SportsCenter on, and literally, it was like angels were harmonizing in my ear.
You were all lathered up in green and white butter.
I couldn't believe it.
Rubbing on your phallic piece
So
there.
the set on ESPN, they started off with, I think, Digger Phelps or Dick Vitale, and they were like, who do you think's going to win the NCAA tournament? Across the board, 4 analysts on ESPN were like, I got Michigan State not only going to the Final Four, but going and advancing to win the championship. All 4. And I was sitting there looking like, am I dreaming? And then yesterday, the President of the United States, Barack Obama, him and I would never see eye to eye on anything, but the one thing that he did that made me happy, he wrote on his board, on his bracket, the 2014 champion is going to be Michigan State. Cuz, can you feel all the love for the Spartans this week?
2 things. 1, you know what pisses me off? The fact that he's sitting there doing bracketology when we could be possibly going to war with Russia. What are you doing? How about you run our country? 2, doesn't it scare you a little bit that everybody and their grandmother is picking Michigan State to win this thing? Isn't that just a little bit scary to you? Like they're now the chic pick. They're the ones that you've got to have them. If you don't have them penciled in to win it, there's something wrong with you. Doesn't that kind of scare you?
Well, I mean, cuz on paper and the way they played the last 3 games, they played dominant. They played really well, and this is the team that we've all been wanting to see all this time.
Unless you're a Michigan fan.
Yeah, and so first of all, let's take a moment to acknowledge the fact that Michigan State is the 2014 Big Ten tournament champions. A great run, capping off a great season with a defeat over Michigan. Getting their first win this year over Michigan was great. Provided us with great momentum going into the NCAA tournament. All the pieces are firing, and we're ready to go. And you asked me, am I concerned regarding everyone picking the Spartans? No. I mean, it's not a bad pick to pick a team that started off the season 18-1 with a great win over Kentucky. And, you know, around the time, every couple years, Michigan State has a run in them. And it just shows you the respect that the nation has for Tom Izzo. And it's well-deserved. I am just now, to cap off the season, waiting for the 4th and final battle. If it can happen, let it happen. Michigan versus Michigan State for all the marbles. Let it happen. Wouldn't that be amazing if somehow the heavens opened up? And because in a tournament you need breaks here and there, you need to hit last minute shots. You got to maybe face an overtime game or clutch situations. But if Michigan and Michigan State could play this season for the 4th time for all the marbles, wouldn't that be great? I'm just so excited. I'm so geeked that this tournament is kicking off. As you can see, I'm well prepared. I got information on all the brackets. I'm loving it.
I'm shaking my head right now. you basically have a book sitting in front of you about every single bracket and every single team in this stupid tournament.
What do you want me to do? Actually work when I'm at work?
That would probably be a good thing.
No way. I am doing my own DocNJock bracketology here, and I know you're like, man, I can't handle all this, but I'm ready to kick this off, man. First of all, let me ask you this.
Sure.
Do you feel that Michigan was disrespected with their seeding and put in this Midwest bracket? I mean, cuz look at this bracket. You got Louisville, you got Duke, you got Wichita State undefeated, you got Kentucky, you got St. Louis. I mean, do you feel like Michigan got holed by this seeding and their placement in the Midwest region?
Yeah, I kind of do. I feel like this was a giant slap in the face for Michigan. I mean, you sit there, you go the whole stretch of the whole season, you come out number 1, you win the Big Ten, and then you sit there and you make it to the championship game. Yeah, you lose to your rival, and you were basically dismantled against your rival. But you sat there and you played one of your best seasons ever, and then you basically get put into the division of death. You know, this Midwest is just, it's staggering. It just, everybody who's in there, you've already mentioned it. You've got Wichita State, who's undefeated. You've got Louisville, who everybody is arguing that they could have been a possible number 1 seed. After that, you've got teams like Kentucky. You've got a St. Louis team who showed a lot of guts and a lot of wherewithal last year. And I know they lost in their tournament, but that's still a really good team. You also have Duke. And then you've got Arizona State, who's kind of a little bit of a, I mean, they're ranked, they're seeded 10th, but that's an upset team right there. So I mean, there's a ton of power in this conference. And yeah, I do think they were slightly disrespected. I mean, you look across, and you look over at the Eastern, and Michigan State, I think they just have a clear path straight to the Final Four. I mean, I don't think they're going to run into any problems until it comes down to basically them versus I've got Florida. I've got Michigan State and I've got Florida as 2 of my Final Four teams. So I don't think they're going to run into a hiccup until they come to Florida. And I think they'll beat Florida. So I think this is laid out for Michigan State to win the whole damn thing.
Exactly. I love their placement, but it kind of stinks that they have to play Delaware out there in Spokane, Washington. I mean, I'm not really thrilled with that. But kick it off in the Midwest region. I think, a sleeper team in that bracket is Kentucky. They kind of stumbled to a 24-10 record, but they got a collection of talent that many people believe will play in the NBA. So, a lot of people are picking Louisville to come out of the Midwest, but I think if it's not Louisville, I think it's going to be Duke.
Can you really call a team a sleeper, though, when they are a 8 seed?
They're an 8 seed.
Is that technically a sleeper?
Yeah.
Dude, I'm thinking sleeper, you've got to be at least a 10, 11, a 12. You got to be somewhere lower.
No.
An 8 seed, 8-9, an 8-9 game? Really? An 8-9 game? Come on, it's a coin flip. No. You're still in the upper half of your region.
No, it could obviously.
I'm going to disagree with you. No way, dude.
You can't call Kentucky. Okay, who's your sleeper in the Midwest then?
In the Midwest? Kentucky. Let me see here. Let me look at what I got going on here. My sleeper in the Midwest, you know what? The team that I think can do some damage is probably NC State. That's the one team I think can do a little bit of damage in that region. And let me tell you why here. They have an RPI of 55 and they have a strength of schedule of 33, which doesn't sound great, but coming from the ACC, when you sit there and you say ACC, that's some of the best schools in this tournament come from there. So you're going up against the likes of Duke, you're going up against the likes of North Carolina. So you've got to earn your stripes to play in the ACC. They score 70 points a game. They don't play a lot of defense. They give up 69 points a game. But I like Warner. The guy's averaging almost 25 points a game. So they're also big down low. So, I mean, I think this team right here, I think they can do a little bit of damage. I think they can scare some people. That's all I'm going to say. I don't have them really advancing very far, but I think they can scare some people.
Okay. Going to the East where Michigan State plays, most people are picking Michigan State to come out of the East. If it's not Michigan State, if they stumble, then I think Virginia. I don't think any other team. Harvard is not your typical number 12 seed. The Crimson reached the NCAA tournament 3 years in a row, beating New Mexico in the second round a year ago for the school's first win in tournament history. So Tommy Amaker is doing good things over there at Harvard, but I think that Michigan State is the class of that region, and I foresee them making the Final Four. I have Michigan State making the Final Four and have them winning the East bracket.
Yeah, I agree with you totally. I think Michigan State's going to just ride the choo-choo train all the way through the East. Overall, my sleeper for the entire tournament actually comes out of the East, and that's Providence. I know they've got hot at the right time in their tournament. They won their tournament. They're an 11th seed, so technically by my rules, they fall into the sleeper category because they're an 11th seed. I think they have the potential to sit there and do really, really good things, to get hot at just the right time. Like I said, they got hot in their tournament, and they basically, according to different bracketologists, they were a bubble team, or they were like a last four out. So these guys sat there, they won their tournament, got in, and now they're an 11th seed. I think they're dangerous. I think they should be. You guys should watch out for them.
No other team comes off hotter and has more confidence than number 11 Providence, which I think played itself off of the bracket bubble by winning the Big East tournament. So that's pretty strong. I'm pretty happy with Providence, and I think the East region is going to be very competitive and a lot of close defensive battles in that region. It's going to be great, but don't sleep on.
Don't spit shine a turd. Come on, you know that's like the easiest conference out there.
They put Michigan State right in it, and I'm thrilled.
Yeah.
Let's look at this West region
Jerking
here.
off with your green and white baby oil.
Because the West is full of teams that overcame alarming slumps and played well down the stretch. You got number 7 Oregon, rebounded with a late season run that saw them beat Arizona. You got Wisconsin and their defense, and Bo Ryan, who's due. I think Bo Ryan.
Do you feel like they're overseeded?
No.
They're number 2.
I like them as number 2 seed. I think they played great in the Big Ten. Wisconsin got a lot of clutch wins, and they played great defense. And if they get hot, they can make a deep run.
I feel like they should have been penalized, like Michigan was penalized and put into the Midwest, and Michigan maybe put in the West. That's just me. It might be my Go Blue bias coming out there.
I think the potential upset in the West, I think Arizona has a chance to be upset. Of Oklahoma State's 12 losses, 10 came by 6 points or less in overtime. So if Arizona matches up with Oklahoma State, they could go down. Oklahoma State is led by lottery pick sophomore guard Marcus Smart, as well as his partner in crime, Markel Brown. Number 9 seed Oklahoma State rebounded in a big way from its midseason funk, and they are a scary team in that West region. So don't sleep on Marcus Smart and Oklahoma State, who's won 5 of his past 7, including a win versus Kansas.
No, who do you have advancing out of that? Who do you think is going to make it to the Final Four from that region?
Okay, I think Arizona has the best chance, but I'm going to take. Part of me wants to put in Wisconsin because they're tournament tough. They went through the Big Ten. They played pretty well, but I think a Wisconsin versus Arizona matchup will be great. But in the end, I got Arizona coming out of the West.
It's like a coin flip between Creighton and Arizona for me. I like Creighton just because they're the underdog. My sleeper coming out of there is Summit League champion North Dakota State. I think they can give teams fits. I know when Oakland was in the Summit League, they gave Oakland a lot of fits, and Oakland gave them a lot of fits. They're a team that likes to get up and down the court. They like to shoot beyond the arc. They don't really have huge big men down low, but they've got pure shooters, and they like to move the ball up and down the court.
Before we wrap up this talk regarding the NCAA tournament, what's your take on the South region?
I think it's Florida, and I think Florida in a big way. They were honored by being the number 1 overall seed. They earned it, especially the last half of the season. They sat there, they won the SEC. I think they are primed to win this whole thing. Billy Donovan puts these teams together every now and again where they've got great guard play. They've got guys down low who don't do a whole lot besides rebound and box out and just get the basketball. He's got a guy that comes off the bench, and the guy basically averages 7 to 8 boards a game, only playing like 15 minutes. So I think Florida is prime to win the South, make it to the Final Four. They're going to run into a tough test against MSU.
Okay. You know what? Don't sleep on UCLA. A year after UCLA fired Ben Howland because the program wasn't winning up to the standards that UCLA is used to, Steve Alford, the Bruins stormed through the Pac-12 tournament, upset Arizona in the title game, playing pretty loose on offense and tough on defense. They're really deep on the bench, and they got a point guard, Kyle Anderson, who had 21 points and 15 rebounds against Arizona. So I like Steve Alford's experience, and I like UCLA. So I'm going to go, I think, you can't pick all number 1 and 2 seeds. So I think I'm going to take from the South region, I like UCLA.
So like a 4-4 matchup for the Final Four there on that half of the equation?
I do.
All right. So as far as a sleeper, a team that I think everybody should be leery of, the Dayton Flyers. They're playing Ohio State. They've got 2 guys who have transferred from Ohio State on that roster. They're another team that likes to get up and down the court. They like to run with the ball. So they might give Ohio State a couple fits.
Okay, so my Final Four, I got UCLA coming out of the South, I got Arizona coming out of the West, Michigan State coming out of the East, and Louisville coming out of the Midwest.
All right, for my Final Four, I've got Florida coming out of the South. I've got Michigan State coming out of the East. I've got Creighton coming out of the West. And then I'm just going to be honest with you. The Midwest is just a straight homer pick for me. I really do think Louisville is probably going to make it. But my Michigan pride here won't allow me to write Louisville in there. So I've got Michigan making it, and then when it gets down to the finals, I got Michigan versus Michigan State, which I think all of us would love to see. Mm-hmm. Just game 4.
I'm just going to stay right now with the Final Four. I'm going to do some more in-depth analysis over the week and see how these teams play out because, you never know. Some of these teams that we picked might go out.
Shit, Michigan might lose to Warford. Who knows?
Please, God, don't let Michigan State go out to Delaware and put a stinker up there in their first game. So I'm hoping that Michigan State lives up to the hype, comes through in a big way. Adrian Payne and Keith Appling deserve it. All 4-year seniors that stay with Tom Izzo have gotten to the Final Four. It's been said numerous times, but it's well-deserved, and Tom Izzo has built a nice program, a well-respected program, and it's tournament time. It's go time, baby. I can't wait. Tomorrow, 4:40 p.m., Michigan State. And also out there, let's show a little love to Western Michigan. They're playing at 2:45. They're going to get spanked, but they got to the tournament. I think they're playing.
Western Michigan is playing.
Who they?
They're a 14 seed, I believe.
Okay,
they're playing Syracuse.
Syracuse.
So, yeah.
They're going to go out. So
who knows, man? Syracuse has been struggling. They've been stubbing their toe. Who knows? We'll see. Let's go. Let's go Broncos.
You a big tournament guy on the weekend, Thursday, Friday, or?
Oh, dude, I love this. Seriously, this is the best time of year. You've got March Madness, which is outstanding. Best basketball tournament. Best tournament in any sport, pretty much. All right. You've got hockey wrapping up, so playoffs are right around the corner. You've got opening day right around the corner. Baseball's about to start. Seasons are starting to change. We finally got hit with a little bit of warm weather. Don't worry, it's going to freeze over come Sunday. But 50 degrees the next couple days. Awesome. This is the best time of year. And you know what? Tomorrow is awesome. It's just sit on your couch, break out your popcorn, and just hopefully you've got enough TVs where you can watch enough of these games.
Coming up next, we're going to talk Tigers baseball with Andrew Vigliotti of Outside Pitch MLB. Stay tuned for great Tigers talk next. Joining us on the line on the Doc and Jock Sports Program is the co-founder and president of Outside Pitch MLB. He is a national MLB reporter and the host of Outside Pitch MLB on iHeartRadio. Joining us on the line is Andrew Vigliotti. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty well, guys. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. I found you guys on Twitter. Before we start talking about our Detroit Tigers, tell us a little bit about Outside Pitch and your radio program. Where can our listeners find you guys?
Well, I appreciate that. We have our radio shows every Monday nights from 10:30 to midnight on Outside Pitch MLB. You can find them. We're on the Sports Chronicles Radio Network, which then uploads to iHeartRadio. So we are on both platforms. You can also see us on OutsidePitchMLB.com with our shows up there. Plus our great content throughout all our writers, including myself. We do a lot of great content there, whether it's news, rumors, feature articles, rankings, Twitter mailbags. We do it all at OutsidePitchMLB.com, which we are part of MLB.com Advanced Media. So we do a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, and I found you on Twitter. You can follow Andrew at Andrew_Vig, V-I-G, and they got a lot of great content, not just discussing Tigers baseball, but discussing issues around the league, and that's why it's a pleasure to have Andrew with us. We're going to talk about our Tigers. Coming off of the loss in the AL Championship Series to Boston, the Tigers made some moves that here in Detroit are kind of questionable, with the move of Doug Fister, letting Johnny Peralta go, and now, as we see, it's kind of biting us here in the exhibition season with Jose Iglesias having shin sprints. Andrew Dirks is going to be out for a significant period of time, which leaves question marks in the outfield. Just to start off, what is your thoughts regarding the Tigers' injuries, and how do you think we can recover from the loss of Jose Iglesias?
That's a tough situation, I believe, with Jose Iglesias. He was obviously picked to be the shortstop, and he brings a very, very good presence from the defensive side, and that's really something the Tigers were looking forward to, and the reason why they let Johnny Peralta, walk away through free agency, and they were very confident with the abilities, especially defensively, of Jose Iglesias, and what they could get from him offensively was just going to be a plus. And he batted .303 last year, between the Tigers and the Red Sox. So I mean, he's a guy who can hit as well. He's not a guy who's going to produce a lot of pop, but if anything, he could have batted like 280, 290, close to 300. I think that would have been great for you guys. So it is a loss, and the Tigers are looking at different options at this point. They're going through out Major League Baseball to try to find some, a different option if they don't want to go internally. We reported that Nick Franklin could be a possibility. They are looking at him. They've, I believe, checked in on Didi Gregorius in Arizona, and I believe they've also, are looking at Darwin Barney of the Chicago Cubs just for a few options there. So, they're definitely looking around baseball right now to try to find an external option if they decide to forego any internal options.
Andrew, with all the injuries that the Tigers have had this spring, how do you think this is going to negatively affect them on the field? Do you think this is going to almost cripple their lineup?
I don't think it'll cripple their lineup. I mean, you talk about a couple injuries, Andy Dirks and obviously Jose Iglesias. I mean, Iglesias, to me, they brought him in more so for the defensive side. So I don't, while he did have a .303 batting average last year, like I said, more so they were looking at it from the defensive side. So they're going to try to figure it out as best they can. Of course, they brought in Ian Kinsler, and they brought in him as well to be able to have a little bit more pop at second base. At least that's the goal there. You still have Miguel Cabrera, still have Victor Martinez, and and Torrey Hunter, and so on and so forth. So you still got a really, really good team. And in fact, I still believe it's one of the best teams in the league. So, you have some injuries prop up. That happens during the course of the year. But still, when you have a stacked rotation with the likes of Verlander and Scherzer, Porcello, and so on and so forth, I still think you have a really, really solid team. So I'm not too worried about those two injuries in particular.
Speaking of the pitching rotation, who do you feel is the Tigers' ace entering the 2014 season?
It's a good question this year, and it's usually, the answer would be Verlander, but it's a little bit more of a debate this year, especially from what we saw from Max Scherzer a year ago when he won 21 games, a career high, and won the Cy Young Award. But still, in my opinion, it's Justin Verlander, because you look at, all those statistics that Scherzer did, and you have to even put Anibal Sanchez in there as well, because he led, he had the lowest ERA in the American League last year, so you have to put him in the conversation. But it's still, to me, Justin Verlander, from 2009 onwards to last year, 2009 to 2012 stretch, he won at least 17 games. Of course, we all remember the Cy Young MVP season he had in 2011 with 24 wins, 5 losses, and a 2.40 ERA, 251 innings, and 250 strikeouts. You can go on and on and on with those statistics. It wasn't a great year for him last year, but still, 13-12 with a 3.46 ERA. That's pretty respectable, and it earned him an All-Star appearance. So, it wasn't a crazy good year for him, but it was still a solid year, and I think he bounces back this year. And obviously, the Tigers are, feeling confident with him enough to give him another opening day start. So I still think while, you have Scherzer and even Anibal Sanchez, Verlander's done it for a long period of time, and he deserves to still be titled as ace.
Let's talk a little bit about Scherzer. I'm interested to hear what you guys are hearing outside of Detroit as far as the Scherzer contract negotiation and Scherzer talks are going. The other day it was reported here that Scherzer wants to be on a rotation where he's the ace, he's the guy. It was just announced the other day that Verlander is going to get the nod for opening day here in Detroit, and that's something that I think a lot of us expected Scherzer to get, especially with the season he had last year. How do you think that's going to play with Scherzer, with the negotiations, and what are you kind of hearing as far as trying to get a contract done? Because Scherzer came out and said that he doesn't want to negotiate during the season, and we're about a week and a half away from opening day.
Right. It's a situation to where I think he wants to be an ace, but I think he more so wants to get paid ace-type money. I think that's where he's coming from. Of course, he wants to be considered an ace, but hey, he won a Cy Young Award, and we all knew who the best pitcher was last year. So, he was the best pitcher for the Tigers last year. But, the difference between him and Verlander's done it for years and years on end, and he's won an MVP and a Cy Young as well. So, Scherzer has to just continue to do what he did last year. It's tough to say that, 21-3 with a 2.90 ERA and 240 strikeouts. It's tough to say, hey, go out and win 21 games again and have the ERA under 3. It's not an easy thing to do, but he's certainly capable of that. I think where he's coming from, guys, is he just wants ace-like money. He wants, a deal way past the Masahiro Tanaka level, because Tanaka obviously, garnered $155 million in that range, and he hasn't even thrown a pitch yet in the regular season here in Major League Baseball. I think that's just where he's coming from, and, he has a case at this point. 15 wins in 2011, 16 wins in 2012, and 21 last year. So if he can have another fantastic season, he's going to garner a lot of money on the free agent market. And if that comes from Detroit and they're willing to give him an ace-like deal, I think he stays in Detroit. It just is a matter of where that money comes from.
I know you're not a fortune teller, but if you had to pick kind of where he slots in, does he slot in maybe there's, I guess, Clayton Kershaw, who's just making a truckload of cash. There's Verlander, who's right behind him. Do you think he comes in right behind Verlander, maybe a little bit further down? Where do you think he kind of slots in for his contract?
It is tough to say, and it all depends on what he does this year. I mean, his value is sky high at this point, coming off that 21-win Cy Young caliber, Cy Young winning season. So I think he's in that $180 to $200 million range right now, if a team will give him that. But he is going to be almost north. It's going to be 29 this season, so that means he would get his contract at his age 30 season. So that could diminish things a little bit, especially if he has, if he regresses a little bit. So he could be, still in the high 100s potentially if he were to get that deal. But we've seen, guys like Irvin Santana who want that $100+ million contract not get it. So, it's a fine line with pitchers. It's really, really, a fine line with them, because you don't know what they're going to give you. They had a great season like Scherzer did last year, but that was his first big-time season. He's had great seasons in the past, but this was a Cy Young season. I mean, do you give him that money? It's tough. So it's hard for me to say, hey, he's going to get $180 to $200+ million this coming season. But at this point, his value's sky high, so he might be earning somewhere in that range.
All right, Andrew, let's take a look at the AL Central. The Tigers are 3-time defending AL Central Division champions. You have, I think, their biggest threats now. Obviously Minnesota's kind of in a rebuilding stage right now. They haven't been competitive in the last couple years. The two teams that are the most likely to compete for the AL Central are going to be, in my opinion, Cleveland and Kansas City. Which team in the AL Central, in your opinion, has improved the most? How do you think the AL Central shapes up after 162 games?
Well, you know what? I think, you talk about the other two teams, like you said. You talk about the Kansas City Royals and you talk about the Cleveland Indians. Well, they improved in some respects. I think it's more so Cleveland just trying to take a step forward with the young talent that they have, especially in the rotation. You talk about, I think that rotation, even losing Ubaldo Jimenez, Danny Salazar is a guy I really like. Corey Kluber is another guy I really like in that rotation. So, they have some guys to go with moving forward. And even in Kansas City, you have that young phenom type pitcher Giordano Ventura, who I think could make some big waves, winning the number 3 spot in that rotation. So I think that can certainly help, especially with the loss of Irvin Santana, who obviously signed with the Braves. But when you look at the Detroit Tigers, it's hard to ignore what they did this offseason as well. Even though they traded Prince Fielder, they got, a guy in Ian Kinsler who they definitely needed. And they get a utility guy like Steve Lombardozzi, and, they lose Jose Iglesias, but, they can find which ways to kind of figure it out from there. But the biggest move they made was getting Joe Nathan for that bullpen, and that was huge because obviously we know for the Detroit Tigers, their Achilles heel at most points last year and the year they went to the World Series was their bullpen. You bring in an established veteran like Joe Nathan to help with that bullpen. I rank the Detroit Tigers as the number 1 team in baseball going into the season because of that. You bring in a Rajah Davis in the outfield to go along with Austin Jackson and the veteran Torrey Hunter who can hit out of the 2 spot, so you got some speed there in the outfield. I like Castellanos at third base, moving Cabrera over to first. So this team, even though they, had some moving parts this offseason, they were able to get Joe Nathan. I am riding the Tigers bandwagon this year. But if you're going to say which team of the Royals and the Indians has a chance to dethrone the Detroit Tigers, you got to look at the Cleveland Indians and say, I love that young rotation. I really, really do. And, Michael Brantley in the outfield, Michael Bourne can stay healthy. They still have some really good members of this team, and they made some huge strides. So I think the Indians right above the Kansas City Royals at this point, but anything can happen. But still, I think the Tigers are easily going to win this division.
From the sound of it, you don't sound like you sound very pro what Dave Dombrowski did this offseason. I, on the other hand, feel a little bit underwhelmed. Is that just because I don't see the big bats in the lineup? Do you think that's kind of where my apprehension's coming from? It's just kind of a new team. This is a very defensive-orientated team now. We don't have the power bats. We're not going to be hitting that 3-run home run to get us out of the ninth inning when we're in a jam.
I think to me, when you look at this team, it's going to be more well-rounded. Obviously, the loss of Iglesias does hurt, especially defensively, but, this team wasn't really rated best defensive team last year either. I think a guy in Castellanos who can grow and develop and finally get that opportunity to play in the big leagues. Miguel Cabrera doesn't have to be at the hot corner anymore to where he can dive and make plays at a frequency we saw he wasn't as healthy last year. So, there's a problem that can be alleviated right there. I really like Castellanos and Cabrera where they're at now. And Ian Kinsler brings, a nice thump to the top of the lineup. You still have Torrey Hunter, who was good in that number 2 spot also. Austin Jackson, obviously he struggled in the postseason, but you could hit him number 1. You can hit him number 9. He's a guy who can basically have 2 leadoff hitters in this lineup because you have speed in the outfield. So, combine that with the bullpen addition of Joe Nathan. That's really the key for me, was Joe Nathan coming to the Detroit Tigers, because we all know they have a great team. They have a great rotation with Verlander, Scherzer, Sanchez, Drew Smyly. I'm a huge fan of. I think he can do some big things this year in the number 4 or 5 spot in Porcello. Their offense and their bullpen with Joe Nathan, I think that was the big key, and we're going to see some big-time things late in games for the Tigers.
All right, Andrew, which team made the best overall moves this season out of the whole MLB?
Well, it's tough to, obviously not say the Yankees at this point, considering the talent that they brought in. You have to look at Brian McCann, Jacoby Ellsbury, assuming he stays healthy. And, Tanaka, as much as I've downplayed the significance of the signing in terms of how I think he can play this year, I think he'll have some growing pains, and I still think that could be a distinct possibility. He's looked good this spring. So, you put that all in there, and, even a Carlos Beltran, assuming all these guys can stay healthy, they're going to have an impact on the New York Yankees team. Also, you got to look in the, in the National League East with the Atlanta Braves. That maybe it sounds a little bit of bias because I am a Braves fan, but, locking up these guys for the long term. Freddie Freeman, 8 years, $135. Andrelton Simmons, $58 million, I believe, over 7 years. And Craig Kimbrell for 4 years, Julio Teheran 6 years, $34 million. They're all value extensions. All these guys 2-3 years from now would be worth way more than what they got in a long-term extension now. So the Braves are able to keep their young core. They spent over $280 million doing it, but at least they have them for the long-term future as they get into that new stadium in 2017. That is a very underrated offseason for the Braves. Not many people would say that, but because they're able to lock up, their young core for the present and the future, has to be considered one of the best off-season moves for any team this year.
All right, Andrew, the question that all Tiger fans want to know, how do the Tigers finish this season?
How do the Tigers finish this season? Well, I believe we already, on Outside Pitch, we talked about the Detroit Tigers this year, and I have them at 96 wins. I have them at 96 wins, which would be, we haven't finished up the entire American League yet, but definitely one of the best records in the league. I have them coming into the season as my number 1 team out of all 30 teams here in Major League Baseball. So I have them as the odds-on favorite to get to the World Series, representing the American League, and even winning the World Series overall. So, I love this team, what they've been able to do this offseason. Even though they traded Prince Fielder, they still brought in Ian Kinsler. They have Joe Nathan. Some injuries, of course, they're going to take shape this year, but that's going to be like that for every other team that the Tigers are going to face this year. They're going to find a way to go about it because they have a great, great team. And you know what? One move I haven't even talked about between the Detroit Tigers, they lose Jim Leyland, but they bring in Brad Ausmus. I was in love with Brad Ausmus. I was in love with that move from the very beginning. I actually said he would be a dark horse candidate right after Jim Leyland resigned and retired. So, I think Brad Ausmus is going to do a heck of a job with this team. He's a guy who can resonate with the players, give instant respect to him because he's played a long time in the major leagues and he knows exactly what he's doing. I love Brad Ausmus, and he's going to be a big-time leader for this team.
Andrew, I want to thank you for your time this evening. Great insight, and hopefully we can have you on in the future throughout the Major League Baseball season. We talk a lot of Tigers. We're big baseball fans here in Detroit. I appreciate your time this evening. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Oh, man, you got it. Anytime.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Again, you guys can find Andrew Vigliotti at Twitter at Andrew_VIG, and you can listen to Outside Pitch MLB on iHeartRadio. And to go to their website to get great baseball insight, you can go to OutsidePitchMLB.com. Andrew, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Oh, I want to thank Andrew for his great insight regarding the Tigers. We look forward to having him on again in the future. Everyone out there, please, thank you for your continued support by visiting our website at www.DetroitSportsPodcast.com. The website is your one-stop hub for everything related to Detroit sports. Podcasts, sports gear, memorabilia, tickets, anything you can think of. Adam and I write blogs on the website. Anything you can think of regarding Detroit sports is on the website. So please check it out, www.DetroitSportsPodcast.com. Coming up next, we are going to talk with Mike Mady of LionsReport.com. He's going to bring some great information regarding the Lions. He is a reporter that is in the locker room often, getting some great information, and we look forward to chatting with him next. All right, everyone, joining us on the Doc and Jock Sports Show is a man who is the Detroit Lions beat writer for LionsReport.com, the online haven for local and displaced Detroit Lions fans. You can find him on Twitter at Lions Report. Joining me is Mike Mady. How are you tonight, Mike?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Oh, everything's great, Mike. I'm glad we get a chance to talk about our Lions in the first week of free agency. There's a little bit of a concern right now in free agency in that I think I read that the Lions only have about $2 million left to spend on free agency. So the pickings are going to be slim for the rest of the way. But they made a move, and they made a splash. They picked up Golden Tate, a wide receiver, to be a complimentary piece since we let go of Nate Burleson. Mike, what are your thoughts on the Lions in the free agent pickups we've made thus far?
I think so far so good. I understand that there are some casual concerns about the salary cap and maybe perceived restraints for the amount of money left. But the salary cap in the NFL is something that is very fluid. You can make room essentially if you need to make room, especially if you look at the Lions' current situation. And people predominantly want to focus on Sue's contract situation and lowering that cap hit. But that's not even really super important. They have several players, whether it be Stafford, Calvin Johnson, and some other players. You want to generally look at players with long terms on their contract, so a few years left remaining. Chris Houston's another one where you can restructure. So the Lions are in shape where they can create cap space pretty much at any point if they need to. There are several players that they could have restructure their deals. So they're in decent shape in terms of that. I think that they had specific targets with what they were looking for in free agency, and I think that they've done a decent job, whether it's retaining some of their own guys or whether it's bringing in someone like Golden Tate, and I think that is who they targeted. I think they felt that he could be someone they could rely on a little bit if Calvin Johnson went down, something that they struggled with recently, and also someone that could really make a defense pay for emphasizing their coverage too much on Calvin Johnson. So I think that was a target, and I think that they demonstrated their desire to have him here by having Mr. Ford meet with him and express that to him directly by just pretty much not letting him leave the practice facility without that signed deal. So to me, I think that they accomplished what they wanted to thus far. There's still a couple more things to do. They're going to try to bring back Sean Hill still. They're waiting a little bit there, and they need to add a safety. But, I mean, that's something that will come. And then the draft, I think they're looking to add depth and future prospects.
I'm glad you brought up Ndamukong Suh. Earlier, I think it was today or it was yesterday, it came out that Tom Luan said that him and Ndamukong Suh's agent are going to be meeting to try to iron out a contract. Do you think a contract gets done, and do you think Suh stays a Lion?
I think that a contract gets done, and I think that Suh stays a Lion, but I will put a disclaimer out there with the notion that it's impossible to know for sure, especially in this business. And the operative word is business. The NFL, probably more than even any other sport, is business first. They prioritize that way over loyalty. Suh has made mention to his affection towards the city of Detroit, his happiness with the team, and the fact that he wants to be there. He said that to us publicly. He's made no mistake about mentioning that. And the Lions have also said that in their conversations with Suh that he wants to stay. So if you take that all at face value, it would indicate that he wants to stay. And I don't think that anything that has happened to this point, him firing his agent, him taking a while to hire a new agent, them not getting a deal done yet, I don't think any of that would be an indicator of his impending leave. But I will say that he has played exceptionally well. He has demonstrated business savvy and a way of making sure that he maximizes his finances, I guess, is the best way to put it. So he set himself up really well if he wanted to hit free agency or wanted to kind of put the Lions at the edge of the cliff and either make them use a really high franchise tag number or let him test the market. But I think that in the NFL, when two teams agree, or when a team and a player agree that they want to have an ongoing relationship and a long-term deal, that they'll make it work. There would be no surprise to me that Suh and the Lions would be able to kind of agree on a reasonable market value, and I wouldn't be surprised if Suh ends up staying in Detroit as the highest paid defensive tackle in the league, but I wouldn't expect there to be much of a hometown discount, and I don't think that the Lions would expect there to be one either. They didn't hesitate to break the bank for Calvin. They didn't hesitate to break the bank for Stafford, and I don't think that will be the case with Suh. So I anticipate him staying. The signs point to him staying, but you never know what happens.
All right, let's loop back around to the Golden Tate signing. How do you feel about the Golden Tate signing, and do you think that he's poised to have an explosive year next year?
I think that he can, and I think that you could see some of the areas that he excelled when you watched Seattle last year. He was someone that really did good with quick passes. So he doesn't need to be a deep downfield threat, and I don't think that the Lions offense would ask him to be either. I think that they have Calvin Johnson who could push the ball downfield, and they have Reggie Bush who's going to draw some attention. So if you can get Golden Tate the ball in space, which the Lions have the offensive weaponry to do that and to play that chess match, that he can rack up the yards, he can make people miss, and he can run after the catch. But also he showed that he is versatile enough to go downfield. He showed that he can match up with some good cornerbacks, and he did that. He was able to produce against against San Francisco, and he was able to produce against Arizona. I mean, he didn't have monster games by any stretch, but he found the end zone. He got some catches and he got some yards, and these are teams that some of the elite receivers in the league struggle to really produce against. So I think that if you look at kind of what he was able to do in an offense that limited him in the sense that they didn't throw the ball a lot, in the sense that he wasn't necessarily always the top target, and he was able to produce under those circumstances, then I think that he will be able to produce in Detroit when when other teams have to respect the run and other teams have to respect Calvin. The thing that I am going to be most intrigued with is what happens if Calvin Johnson goes down and if you look at Tate as the true number one receiver. Obviously, again, the offense is a little bit set up better to pass than what Seattle had, but also the fact that Seattle ran so much kind of forced defenses to really hone in on that. So it was a bit advantageous for Tate to be productive, and that's why he was really efficient with catching the ball, and that's why he was able to rack up a lot of yards after the catch. So hopefully, if you're a Lions fan, that's not something that you'll even have to see it, but if he sits as a number two receiver, I think that he'll be able to eat up catches and eat up yards, and and kind of be the most productive number 2 receiver we've seen in Detroit in a long time, and that could be a huge benefit for the Lions. But if Calvin Johnson does miss some games and does miss some time, I'm not saying he won't produce. I'm saying that I'm interested to see if he does.
Also, a key point, too, with the second receiver is also the progression of Matthew Stafford. And now, last season, I think it was kind of a season where he regressed a little bit in terms of throwing interceptions, not coming through in the clutch. What do you think about Matthew Stafford in terms of his season this year? And do you think he can make a guy like a Golden Tate, just similar to Russell Wilson? Because many people have said that Golden Tate kind of was, a deficient player until Russell Wilson got there. So do you think a quarterback like Matthew Stafford making the progression can also assist in the development of Golden Tate?
Yeah, well, I think that's going to be a mutual relationship. When you talk about Stafford, I think that when you watch him play, I understand it can be maddening and frustrating, and certainly he was in a bit of a funk at the end of last year, and by my assessment, and that's through watching the games live and going back and watching them on tape, he was the root cause of them collapsing at the end of last season. And there were a lot of people that were involved with that. And I'm not going to put all the blame on his shoulders, but he was the biggest difference maker. He could have made the difference, and he didn't. He missed throws that he should have made, and these were throws that were schematically set up very well for him and gave the Lions advantageous matchups, and he didn't take advantage. But with that said, I think that Golden Tate has a skill set that really aids Stafford. Again, we talked about the high percentage passes, Golden Tate's ability to eat up yards quickly, to catch the ball behind the line of scrimmage, which he did a lot of in Seattle, or catch the ball within the first 10 yards, which, again, he did a lot of in Seattle. I think that will help Stafford get those easy completions. And the other thing, and Tate actually was the one that brought this up, he felt that he could help Stafford because he thought that Stafford did a great job of quote-unquote throwing people open. Stafford will put the ball away from you intentionally because he wants to get you away from the defender, whether that's a little bit low to the ground or whether that's a little bit to your left or to your right or whatever it is. And Tate said that he believes that one of his actual strengths is to be able to make those catches, to be able to extend, to be able to adjust to the ball. And if that proves to be true, that can be really helpful, because whether you blame it on accuracy issues or whether it is something that Stafford is naturally trying to do, which is throw a receiver open, which all good quarterbacks will do, that really meshes well in kind of the way that we've seen Detroit's offense play and the way that we've seen Stafford perform. So I think that Stafford's set up to have a really strong year. And I mean, we saw flashes of it. We've seen it a couple of years ago. We saw it in the first half of last season, and it's just a matter of what happens when injuries occur. And we saw banged-up Calvin Johnson kind of struggle, whether it be missed games, drop passes, miss the second half of games, whatever it might be. And Stafford would struggle to hit receivers. He would get out of a rhythm, and as much as he maybe struggled, his receivers also weren't bailing him out. So if you put him in a situation now where you have a coaching staff that is going to harp on fundamentals, if you have receivers that are going to be able to catch the ball and demonstrate those consistent hands, and you have an offense that will enable him to get into a rhythm with high percentage passes, will be able to run the ball, and will have an offensive line that played really well a year matured, I think that all of those indicate a strong season. And I think that at his age and kind of at the crossroads he is in his career, this is it. This is where he becomes elite, or this is where he kind of just wallows as a super talented quarterback that never put it together. I think the former will be what manifests itself next season, but that's just my assessment.
Great point, Mike, and that's what we're all hoping. In that, we just cut him a check for $17.5 million. With that, he is 26 years old. We got to remember that he's a young quarterback still, and that he's entering into his prime. But when you have talent like Calvin Johnson, you're expected to do a lot more, and you're exactly right. He has to show it this season. Now, let's talk about what us fans call the Lions Super Bowl, the NFL draft coming up. Adam and I had a chat and a discussion regarding the strengths and weaknesses of both Darqueze Dennard and Justin Gilbert, and I'm still hoping that they're going to target a cornerback at 10, but a lot of talk nationally, a lot of talk amongst friends is cornerbacks shouldn't be taken that high because they take usually 1 or 2 years to develop. And so with the corners on our team, they may not target cornerback. What are your thoughts on what the Lions are going to do at number 10? And if it's between Denard and Gilbert, who do you think's better?
Well, that's a really good question, and the Lions have openly said that they're not looking to win the Super Bowl 5 years from now. This is the year. They've made no qualms about that. They want to win this year. They do. And truth be told, if they draft a cornerback 10th overall, neither of those guys are going to come in and help them that much this year. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Chris Houston can have a bounce-back offseason, and I understand that is a bit of a variable, but he's demonstrated it in the past. If he can have a bounce-back offseason, and if Darius Slay progresses as the team seems to think that he can, and I got to tell you, within the Lions locker room, when you talk to players and you talk to the coaches, granted they're a different set of coaches this year, but there is a ton of upside perceived to be in Darius Slay. And you also can tell when you talk to Darius Slay, he has the mindset that he needs to be successful. In addition to his physical tools, he doesn't lack confidence, I guess is the best way to put it. The last time I talked to him last season, he was with a group of players kind of talking about how he was the fastest player on the team. And him and Louis Delmas got into a bit of a friendly debate on whether he was faster than Calvin Johnson or not. And I guess the moral of the story is he has supreme confidence in himself, and a bad game does not get him down. He will come back, and it's not confident to the point where he will slack, though. He will put in the work in the off season, and he will put in the work in the film room, and he will do things to get himself to the next level. And Rasheem Mathis really spent a lot of time with him last season, too, trying to help him. So all of that said, I don't know that either of those cornerbacks could come in and take the starting job from those two guys next season, and that's assuming the Lions don't bring in a veteran option like a Mathis back or someone in that mold that could end up taking the job. So if they take a cornerback 10th overall, even if they hit a home run with that cornerback, I don't think that they will be the player that really contributes that much this year, and I don't think that will be the difference between a playoff run or another top 10 pick. With that said, I think long-term, Gilbert actually projects a little bit better. He has better physical tools, and he's more of the gamble, but he's the one that could turn into that shutdown elite Pro Bowl corner. And if you're drafting a corner in the top 10, that's what you need. If you don't get an elite corner, if you get someone that can start, but they're just kind of a above average contributor, you spent too high of a price on that player. But if you get someone like a Richard Sherman,
don't you open your mouth about the best, or I'm gonna shut it for you real quick.
Or any other elite cornerback that could shut down half of the field, that you could put on an island, and that you could change the way that you play defense because of how good this player is, then it's a great pick, and it's well worth it at that position. The thing is, Gilbert is the only one that looks like he will be able to take that step eventually, but he will probably struggle more out of the two in year one because of the fact that he does rely a bit on his athleticism, and he maybe just he's not as NFL ready, I guess is what I mean to say, and will struggle down the field and might draw a lot of holding penalties, something that I think will infuriate Lions fans after watching Bill Bentley do it so many times early in his career. So I don't know if a cornerback is going to be the pick. I'm not sure if the Lions are leaning that way. They're definitely showing interest in defensive backs with their pre-draft visits and their pro day scouting, but of course they have to do that. And maybe they're planning to trade down too. I'm not sure. But with that said, one of those cornerbacks in round one could be something that works out great for the next 10 years, but probably won't have a huge influence on next year.
What do you think Jim Caldwell's effect on this team will be moving forward?
Well, it's interesting because Tom Lawand recently, and I wasn't there for this, but I'm aware of it, he talked about how he respected Jim Schwartz and the fact that he believed Jim Schwartz will probably get a head coaching job at some point. He thought he was a good football coach, etc. And then he went on to say that although this isn't a slight against Jim Schwartz, that he feels a difference instantly with Caldwell in the facility, and he thinks that he's bringing just a completely new mindset to the team. And Caldwell is someone that will enforce discipline. He's somebody that will enforce fundamentals, and he's someone that will just ensure that the team is prepared every week. He preached that a lot. I think, really sincerely has the right philosophical beliefs with what he's going to do with the team. He's been very strategic with the people that he's hired as his assistants, and I think that he is demonstrating a sincere plan. You talk to the Lions players, and Golden Tate was sure to say this, and Brandon Pettigrew has also echoed it as well. There's a ton of confidence in this coaching staff's ability to get receivers open, which I think translates well to the overall schematic plans that the team has and their vision for the offense, their vision for the defense. There is a real plan. There are an understanding of the weapons that they have, and I think that they know how they want to use them. And I think that the Lions are ready with the talent that they have, which is a perfect scenario for a new coach. I think that they'll buy in the Caldwell system. I think that you see that when you hear what other players have to say about him, players with such regard as Peyton Manning, who will go to bat for him and what he can do, and just even the players that were on that 2-14 Colts team and their testament to him holding the team together and him making sure that they were still a one unit in the locker room. And you saw that team was going to go 0-16. Most people thought that they would, and they didn't. They won a couple games at the end of the season. They rallied. They demonstrated an ability to have mental toughness, and I think that is something that they got from their coach. And interestingly enough, they won their games with Dan Orlovsky, which was the same quarterback that went 0-16 in Detroit. So it's not really comparable, but it's a situation where he was able to take someone that didn't flourish in Detroit and was able to at least squeeze something out of him. I understand 2 wins is nothing, but he was able to get the most out of a player that really hasn't been able to have a ton of NFL success. And you look at someone as talented as Matthew Stafford, who has really shown an ability to be productive and has really shown anything that you might want an elite quarterback to have. He has. There's nothing that he's missing. And if Caldwell's able to have done this in the past and get the most out of the players that he's had, which you've seen everywhere he's been, you got to think that he'll do it again in Detroit.
Okay, yes or no? Are the Lions making the playoffs next season?
I got to believe that they will. And I got to believe that for multiple reasons. First and foremost, you got to look at the division. Green Bay will be good, and that's probably going to be a constant for as long as Aaron Rodgers is there. It's going to be difficult for Green Bay to struggle when they have one of the best, if not the best quarterback in the league. But you look at Minnesota, they don't have a quarterback yet, and it's going to be difficult for them to kind of challenge, I guess, for the division, or even Detroit should be able to get a win or two out of that. You look at Chicago, they've tried to rebuild their defense a bit, but I don't know that enough has happened for them to have a defense that is going to be able to keep up with the competitive offenses that you're going to see in Green Bay and you're going to see in Detroit. And they've lost a backup quarterback, and Jay Cutler has demonstrated an inability to stay healthy lately. And if he goes down, you got to think what's going to happen there. If he stays healthy, then with their running back and their receivers, you have to imagine also that they'll be a pretty successful offense. But I got to think Detroit, on paper at least defensively, is set up to at least tilt the scales towards them. So I think this will be competitive within their division. I think that they will have a little bit of an easier schedule next season. But I mean, I always hate predicting how a schedule is going to be at this time of year, because the teams that seem to have the worst schedules always seem to not be so bad lately, or when the season comes. But with all of that said, I think that what gives me the most confidence is I sincerely believe that this is what will need to have happened. They'll need to bring in a new coach, and I don't want to sit there and harp on the job that Jim Schwartz did, because I don't know that I was as much of a proponent of his needing to be dismissed as much as some other people were. Not to say that there weren't opportunities, but I don't know if it was as bad as people made it out to be. But with that said, I think that the message has been communicated loud and clear to the locker room that the time to win is now. And I understand that being motivated and having an understanding of you need to be disciplined and you need to do what you need to do to win is one thing, and it can't happen without the talent, but the talent is sincerely there. They will be a better roster to start off 2014 than they were to start off 2013, and that starts with some of their players just demonstrating internal growth. Stafford will be a better quarterback, not necessarily because of the coaches, although the coaches will play a role, but because he'll be a year more experienced. He'll learn from the mistakes that he had the year before, and Stafford around here kind of gets the rep of being not the most, I guess, hard-working individual, but I think that perception is pretty far from the truth, because when you talk to the people around him, and I've made it a point to talk to Chris Durham, someone that spends off-season with him, to see how he works, and they talk about how hard he works. I understand that Scott Linehan also wasn't held in the highest regard around here, but you talk to Scott Linehan, and he said Stafford was one of the most accountable quarterbacks that he's ever been around. And just because it's not always publicly displayed doesn't necessarily mean that the effort isn't going in. And I think that the focus on bringing in people that can help him refine his game, which is something that naturally occurs with time when you're talking about someone that is in their mid-20s, and that is going to help. Just a fresh perspective, a fresh eyes on the problem, and just being able to help him correct the nuances of his game that are the difference between that touchdown pass that they didn't get last year to the one that they'll get this year, which will be the difference. You look at them losing all the close games that they've lost. If they make those plays, and I understand it's a cliche, but it couldn't be more true for the Lions. If they make those few plays, it's going to be the difference between them winning 4 or 5 more games, and that's going to be what gets them in the playoffs. So I do think that they'll make the playoffs next year.
All right, Mike. Thank you so much for your great insight regarding the Lions. Again, guys, listening to the podcast, you can find Mike on Twitter at Lions Report, and you can check out his great website with lots of detailed opinions and blogs at lionsreport.com. Mike, thanks for coming on the podcast. We hope to have you on later on during training camp and during the season. Thank you so much for coming on our podcast.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care, Mike. We'll be in touch.
Sounds good. Take care. Thanks.
Man, cuz, what a great podcast so far. All the great information, great interviews. I'm glad we were able to set that up. Everyone out there, you can be a part of the Detroit Sports Podcast. If you're passionate about Detroit sports, message us on Twitter at Detroit Podcast. Adam and I love to banter back and forth. We throw out questions almost daily. Hit us up, message us, we'll retweet you, and we love having sports debates regarding Detroit sports. So please feel free to message us, and we love interacting with our fans. I think we are the most interactive Twitter page in the area, hands down. To end the show, Adam has another opening day story that he feels he needs to share with us. I got a lot of funny reactions from last week's opening day stories. So please share with us. Tell us another story from opening day.
Before I proceed, I wanted to thank those guys again for coming on. A lot of great information from them. I think they're really beneficial for our show and for our listenership as well. But going on to opening day. So this was a few years ago. Again, tons of drinking, lots of beer, lots of alcohol. Started pretty early, worked our way into the wee hours. Don't necessarily remember how I got back to Greektown Casino and to the parking structure. If you were to take a set of toilet paper rolls and put them over your eyes and just kind of see what you could see, that was kind of all I kind of remember, but looking down at my feet the entire time. Next thing I know, I was waking up inside the elevator with my buddy as we were both passed out on the floor of the elevator at Greektown. Somehow got into the car, drove to the strip club, walked into the strip club. Now, I don't remember any of this. I was filled in on all of this by my wife. So I walk into the strip club because she goes too. She's a trooper like that. She's down for the cause. Walk into the strip club. Strip club gives you free hot dogs that day. Walk in. I grab a hot dog. I hurry up, cram a hot dog down my throat. I walk by 2 strippers, grab them both by the waist. Go sit down. I sit them both on my lap, and I pull them both in really, really close, and I whisper something in their ears. I have an issue with my penis. It's not that hard. I don't know what I said, but according to the reaction that they gave me, because they both looked at me with astonishment and disgust in their face, and I guess they were all of 2 seconds away from slapping me in the face, they got up and walked away. So you better believe it was pretty gross and pretty horrific to kind of make these strippers that upset as they stormed away. After they got off my lap and ran away from me, upset as all hell, that hot dog that I crammed down, yeah, that came back up all over the strip club floor as I was quickly escorted out the door. And that was how I wrapped up that opening day. Next week's story is going to be epic, by the way. It involves more strip club antics, dirty things strippers do, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I can tell you that much.
Wow, cuz you couldn't keep it down at the strip club. I mean, at that point in time, does everyone like back away and is like, "Oh, that's disgusting. That's nasty." I can only imagine the smell. The smell. Oh my god, cuz that's disgusting, man. You got
Dude, I was a trooper. I was in my glory. I grabbed these broads. I bring them over. I set them down. I'm like, "What's up, ladies?" And I said something really, really perverse to them. What are you gonna do?
What are you gonna do? All right, great story, Jock. Everyone out there, I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please feel free to message us anytime on Twitter at Detroit Podcast, on Facebook. Message us, leave us feedback. If there's anything you want to see on the podcast, let us know. We'll try to make it happen because I think we are one of the great shows out there. The Doc and Jock Show is passionate about Detroit sports, and we do this because we are sick in the head and we love Detroit sports. We would do this. We would do this anytime over some beers, and we're lucky enough to be able to put our brains together and put together this podcast every week. So for the Jock, Adam, the pervert Straczynski, I am the Doc, John Macaroon. Thanks for listening to this podcast. We'll see everyone next week. Go Green.
March Madness, baby. We're going to talk NCAA tourney. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Da-da-da-da-da. I don't know, is that how the NCAA tournament song goes? I have no idea. Man, I wanted to thank you for the dick pic earlier today. I think it was a monster hog, too.
No? You're really weird.